The judge had already said my name in the tone people use for a diagnosis when I stopped being myself and inherited somebody else's disaster. One breath, I was on my sofa with a cold cup of tea and a book I was too annoyed to finish. And the next, I was sitting at a polished table in a courtroom in a coat I did not own, and a young woman across the aisle was crying so beautifully that two people in the gallery had already started crying with her. She isolated him, Marisol Lang said, wiping her face, for the last 2 years of his life. I wasn't allowed in the house, and then she had him sign everything over. I knew that voice. I knew that coat. I had finished this book at 2 in the morning 3 days ago, a novel called The Lang Inheritance, and the weeping girl was Marisol, the warm-hearted younger sister every reader adored, and I was apparently Odette Lang, the cold elder daughter whose entire purpose across 400 pages was to be exposed in this exact hearing, stripped of everything, and dead of a bad winter by the epilogue. And then I saw them, hanging in the air over the gallery like breath on a cold morning, faint gray letters that nobody else in that room could possibly see. Finally, Odette gets what she deserves. Saul is such a sweetheart for even showing up. Watch her sneer, she always sneers. I did not sneer. I put my hands flat on the table because they had started to shake, and I thought, with the awful calm of someone who has fallen a long way and has not yet hit anything, all right, so this is the room. Then I am going to read every one of these little floating spoilers, and I am going to take this whole story apart before lunch. My own solicitor leaned in, Ambrose Teague, silver and unhurried, the family's man for 30 years, and he said, warmly, "Say nothing, Odette. Let me handle it. Emotional outbursts are exactly what they want." A comment drifted past his shoulder. Teague is the only decent man in this book. Honestly, Odette doesn't deserve a lawyer that patient, and in the novel I had followed that advice and said nothing, for the entire hearing, and lost. So instead, I said out loud to the judge, "May I ask about the date on the will?" Teague's hand closed on my sleeve. The judge said I might, and I said, "It's dated the 4th of November. My father had a bowel resection on the 4th of November. He was under general anesthetic from 7 in the morning and in recovery until the following afternoon." I did not know that from memory. I knew it because 40 minutes earlier, while the clerk was still reading the case number, a comment had drifted lazily across the room saying, "The will date is the biggest plot hole in this book. He was literally in surgery. Nobody ever checks it." And I had sat there staring at those pale letters like a woman handed a key through a window. "The hospital keeps theater logs," I said. "They keep them for 7 years. I'd like them read into the record." The courtroom made the low, uneasy noise of 40 people doing arithmetic at once, and Marisol's tears stopped for exactly half a beat, like a tap turned a quarter closed, and Ambrose Teague did not move a single muscle, which told me more than anything he could have said. I need to tell you what Odette actually was, because the book had spent 400 pages telling me, and I had believed it while I was outside the story. She was cold, they said. She had not attended her father's 60th. She had let a stranger nurse him. In the 2 hours it took the clerk to send for those theater logs, I went through her life like a stranger reading a diary, and every fact was true, and every single one had been rotated 90 degrees. She missed the 60th because the invitation went to an address she had not lived at for 4 years, and the person who kept the family address book was Teague. She let a stranger nurse him because, when she moved back to do it herself, she was told gently by Teague that the arrangement was already made, and pushing would upset her father's routine. And the isolation, the great crime Marisol had just wept about, was a locked gate and a changed code at a house Odette did not own, which Teague had arranged the same month for security. There was a letter, too. In Chapter 19, Odette writes to her sister, 3 pages, asking to meet, and the readers all agree it is insincere, and Marisol never answers. Marisol never answers because Marisol never received it, because it went to the estate office, because everything went to the estate office. Every cruelty in that book was real. Somebody had simply been standing behind all of them with an appointment diary. Thank you for listening to Channel Crystal Novel. They pivoted before the logs arrived because the patient ones always feel the floor move first. Teague rose, and he did the only thing he had ever needed to do in 30 years, which was to be the most reasonable person in the room. Your Honor, my client is unwell, he said, sorrowful, gentle. She's confusing dates, she's accusing a hospital, and in a moment she'll accuse me, and I have acted for this family since these girls were children. He turned, just slightly, so the gallery could see his face. Odette, I have watched you be lonely for 15 years, and I have never once blamed you for it. I only ever wanted to keep the peace. And it landed. I felt the room lean toward him, because it was aimed at the true thing. She had been lonely for 15 years. That part was not a lie, and he had been in the room for every year of it, and he was now holding up her loneliness as proof she could not be trusted to count. The comments turned like a shoal of fish. Okay, Teague is so patient with her. She is unstable, though, that's canon. And for one long breath, I sat there under a name that was not mine, in a body that had been losing this argument since page 1. And I understood exactly how Odette Lang had died of a bad winter. Then the theater logs came in. The clerk read them, flatly, the way clerks do, which is the most devastating way anything has ever been read aloud. Admitted 6:40, anesthesia induced 7:12, procedure concluded 11:50, patient non-responsive in recovery until the following afternoon. And Rhett, Marisol's husband, who had been going redder and redder in the second row, and who had never had an original thought in 400 pages, chose that moment to be exactly what he was, and said, at volume, to Ambrose Teague, "You told us the date wouldn't matter. You said nobody ever pulls hospital records in a probate. 6 words is all it takes." The judge asked Mr. Teague to remain seated. Marisol turned to her husband with her mouth open, and then turned to Teague, and I watched a beloved heroine work out, live in front of a gallery, that she had not been the protagonist of anything. "You told me she locked me out," she said. "You gave me the code and told me she changed it." And Teague said the only thing he said after the logs came in, without heat, in the tone you would use to correct a spelling error. The estate has always been managed for the family's benefit. It has been managed the same way for 30 years. Which was, of course, a confession of 30 years, delivered in one flat sentence by the most careful man in the county. Because the truly cold ones never fear the room. They only forget it is there. It was not one will. It was 11 estates, back to the year 94, all administered by the same office, all with the same tidy pattern of a family divided early, and a solicitor left standing at the end holding the fees, the management contracts, and, in 4 cases, the property. The Law Society opened proceedings within the month, and Teague was struck off inside a year, which is the professional equivalent of being taken outside and shot in the car park. 2 of those 11 families came forward, and then 5 more. The firm his name had been on since 1991 took it off the door and issued a statement using the phrase "deeply concerned," which in that world is a public flogging performed in cream card stock. The will was set aside, and Marisol found me in the corridor afterwards and said, "I want to hate you. It would be so much easier." And I said, "I know, he counted on that for 15 years and it was the cheapest thing he ever bought." She came to the house on the Sunday. It took 8 hours, and neither of us was kind for the first 3. And she has come nearly every Sunday since. He tried once, at the end, on the courthouse steps, because the quiet ones always have one more move, and it is always the softest. "I kept that family together," Ambrose Teague said. "Whatever else is true, that is also true, and you know it." And I said, "You kept us apart, Ambrose. You just did it so slowly, we thanked you for the peace." I got the house. I did not want the house, so I turned it into something useful. And I live in 3 rooms of it, and the rest is a small legal advice center, free, 2 afternoons a week, mostly for people whose families are being quietly managed by somebody with an appointment diary. Inez, my father's housekeeper for 22 years, runs the front desk and has opinions about everyone. Marisol does the intake forms, And every single time a client sits down with a document in their hands, before anything else, Inez says it in her flat, unimpressed voice, like a woman saying grace. Check the date. It is on a sign by the door now. It is on the mugs. Last week, a young man came in with his mother's will in a folder, and Inez said it before he had his coat off, and he laughed, and then he checked, and then he stopped laughing. The comments stopped about a year in. I looked up One Ordinary Tuesday and realized I had not seen one in months, and I understood the book was over, and that I had read past the last page and out the other side into a life that was nobody's plot but mine. I do not miss the spoilers. Knowing the ending is only a gift when you are trapped in somebody else's. So let me ask you, since you sat in that courtroom with her, did she go far enough? Or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next.